Hi, thank you for joining us for final Holloway reading of the spring semester. I'm really elated that the culminating reading is going to be performed by Tim Wood. So before we commence, I just wanted to, this is my first semester running the Holloway series, and I just wanted to offer some gratitude to all the people who have helped run this series, support this series, and in many different ways. First of all, it's been really great working with Camille Santana-Considine. Who will also be introducing Tim Wood, and also Pedro Milan, who will be graduating this spring. I also want to thank Dana, Grace, Jo Marie, John, and our chair Eric for really supporting this series. It's been, I've learned so much from everyone on staff. So, can we give a final? Tim, who I've gotten to know a bit, will be reading, will be our headlining reader. He is already a beloved colleague and faculty member, and it's going to be such a treat to hear his poems. But before we hear Tim read, we're going to hear from graduate English student Andrew David King. And I'm looking forward to hearing Andrew David King read. Andrew David King has taught literature, creative writing, and philosophy at the U of Iowa, UC Davis, and Berkeley. King was a visiting writer at the University of Iowa. They worked for the Whitman Archive, helping to edit and encode Whitman's late life correspondence. Andrew David King received a BA in UC Berkeley, an M.F.A. at Iowa Writers Workshop, and an M.A. with distinction at Central European University. So let us give a hand for Andrew David King.
Thanks so much, Kathy, for the introduction, and to Camille, Pedro, and Tim for this space, and to everyone for being here today. Poem with or without chorus. In an attempt to resist the lyric I opened the double doors onto the field with its dilapidated granary, saw it straddle the last bouts of a fickle existence, not the eyes, but the spaces around the eyes of a woman who could have sworn she would die before her husband. In an attempt to be proven wrong, to be made naked as a crow, having taken a worm for string and so builds rather than eats, I forbid the land to uncrease its cartography, which would have otherwise kept uncreasing until all our mouths were full of paper. I wanted a shared mouth, a hand-me-down tunnel to gawk through, to breed orison with horizon. Claire walked until he realized the world's edge would fool him back to his first spot. Eventually, I gave I the coffin of its short space and listened. It was not like, for like is shared, but was a single cricket casting circles wider so that everything that could would hear some minor tumult and think it a fluke, the body answering itself. That was a poem I wrote for Lynn Haginian's workshop many years ago. Tim and I, as you might know, were both her students. And in talking for this reading, I think we agree that her genius in several senses presides over, but also in this gathering. And there's too much to say about Lynn, and the circumference of her loss just keeps expanding. But I want to tell just one brief story. Over a decade ago, when I had just arrived at Berkeley as an undergrad, I was wandering the hallways of Wheeler, actually right outside this room, and I found this stack of beautiful poetry books that someone had left on one of the windowsills. Now, new to the environment, unclear what the sort of social codes were, I looked at the stack for a while, and I might have waited there for some time, actually, but eventually I decided to take them, and I left a little note with my phone number in case the owner returned and thought better of it. Anyhow, on my BART ride home, I discovered, leafing through these volumes to my horror, that several had been inscribed to Lynn with deeply personal messages. Now, I hadn't met Lynn yet. I didn't understand then that this was her way of sending texts. She no longer needed back into the communal bloodstream, but I knew who she was and that I wanted to work with her, so I was mortified. I thought a lot about it. Eventually I made up my mind, and one day I came to her office during office hours, our first meeting ever, to confess that I had stolen her books. And that was the start of a friendship that didn't so much end this February as take on a new form. Poem Without Wonder. If I asked what it was about dreams that made them so easily give way to blankness, 10 condors constellated around a dead star in the middle of the road, would I be stripping the frame for its wood? I wanted to remain the man who, in my Halloween dream, wheeled a blowtorch across 100 miles of snowed-in Sierra, kept the asphalt clear for crowds of conceivable persons. Somewhere a stalactite of ice had leapt to the floor of a cave, spoils of ornaments below and a translucent stump above, an orb like an eye after death, lidless and plain, done seeing and left to be seen in the wordless collocation of the physical. Despite the cold and the stones, there was no sadness, just a purposeful hole in the white, movement along the x-axis, a likening of history to a series of pistons and the ambushed suns that push them. Leaving apartments. In Shanghai, beyond the sill beehives, a woman chopping cabbage, pressing down the head to drown it. Eyelash of the window washers stroke across the frosted glass of a shower. A flag for luck ate at the air. I left it there. In Iowa, I left the attic unopened when we left, never saw the old insulation, snow in the diorama we lived under, snow on the envelope of your mouth. I took 3 pictures looking west, lovely ones, none good. Air in the shape of me stirred in the truck. The house, told to breathe out and hold it, did. Bookshelves gone, somehow a wound I left in the wall at the height of my eyes. Here, after all, was the secret room. And the last thing I'm going to read is an elegy I wrote for Lynn the afternoon I learned she died. And one thing I want to mention about this poem is that it's written with 4-word lines, which is a loose reference to Lynn's own use of formal constraints. And while it's difficult to audibly represent that structure, I'm going to try. So I'm going to leave just ever so slight a pause at some of the enjambments and line breaks to try to convey some of the pressure that these lines exert on the poem visually and also semantically. I share this with some trepidation. There's something about the publicizing gesture sort of inherent in the concept of the elegy, at least in its most familiar mode in which the memorialized person is spoken to, or appears even, that feels false or somehow distortive of an attempt to think clearly about the shape and nature of loss. But the main reason for trepidation is that I think Lynn, despite her interest in elegy and works like the following, would wag her finger at me and tell me not to write this, and then say something sweet, that combination of fierceness, funniness, and grace by which so many of us knew her. Something on paper. I will now never know what you were going to tell me about H and her illness, but I did learn of yours, the cave yawning like a bud into a blind sea of signs taken for human and signs that never could be. I ordered what you said was your son's favorite salad while a woman's black schnauzer spoke over all of us from under a table. I was aware of the web of air between our branches and the cancer that bedded down in the navel of the maze. I read the book you gave me, read it, left my glasses and thought at the lakeside. We will have, you said, to talk about that later, but here is an anecdote about how the parking attendant was the same for 2 courses of chemo 5 presidents apart. The world is so much worse now, isn't it? You said, he said, Medicine whistled at high speeds through our chests. Your wig, my phrase, glasses of water at attention. You denied story had anything to do with it. A bad, close reader, a close, bad reader, I pointed. Here, pray, tell, the time that waits in the next room to wait. From behind wood panels, an instrument, a siren, we went from warmly to love to warmly, and I did not describe finding my letter in your archive as if our meeting now were elsewhere. I could have, but didn't say I didn't recall anything I had said, that my reply was the tulip tree next door. The night before I heard via text, I dreamt of corridors in a musky hall, vending machines, the white light of progress, not thinking of the scene of cold pastoral, those first nights in Willits as I hallucinated them from your early journals, Toomba, the dogs, the children collaged with sun. 7 minutes later, I saw no one had updated your Wikipedia page. 45 minutes later, I saw they had. My apology for the manuscript's lateness was to put sentences in the past tense and ask the bottle-brush trees if they might scrub harder until any of the visible, invisible lines that made sight difficult made what sight's difficulty was after. Shameless, tired, I asked you to repeat what John Zorn said to a telephone critic. You know the Marlboro Man? Well, I am not the Marlboro Man. Don't come here again. I knew what he had said, forgot who had said it, asked to hear it again. In seminar that day, you said you could drop dead any moment, which is what happens for all of us from the perspective of a subduction zone, a reversion to the meanness of the world in matter's blank ledger. A student, not yet a friend of clouds, when you rose for rest, I pointed to but couldn't name things. A pause, a rose, moon in the palm of a motorcycle's mirror, me on my back and the delayed future, withdrawal symptoms like gunshots typed across the brain, abacus of pigeons on a line that carries in its fiber braid a message that may not, for any number of narrative reasons, be said to be heard. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Andy. Before I introduce Tim, just a few quick housekeeping items. The first is that the reading will be followed by a Q&A, so think of your question. The second is that we have B from Pegasus selling Tim's books in the back, so get a copy. And then the third is that we have a sign-up sheet over there for the Holloway mailing list if you're not on it. You should be. Tim's last book, Notched Sunsets, opens with two epigraphs. The first is Friedrich Holderlin from Der Frühling. Der Morgen, der erwacht, ist aus den Dämmerungen. The morning is awakened out of the twilight. The second is Walt Whitman, from A Backward Glance Over Traveled Roads, or, at most, Twilight Dimness. The first poem in the book, a numbered sequence that goes from 14 to 31 and then 1 to 13, is relentlessly citational, which Andy kind of already talked about. Woods Past Writing, Yusef Komunyakaa, Google Translate, Lynn Ginian, Ezra Pound, Shakespeare's Sonnets, Virgil's Aeneid, Kathy Acker, Guns N' Roses, Frank O'Hara, Foucault, Melville, Adorno, Donne. Glossing all the inspirations alone takes 13 pages of notes. The Holderlin, though, provides a way into Wood's figuration of moments of changing light. Dämmerungen is either dusk or dawn. The line might also be translated as, quote, the morning, the awakening is from the twilight. Wood gives us another translation, quote, abundance awakens a forsworn earth. These liminal moments of light recur, but dawn awakens as, quote, a fad and a pun, too. What dawns on us is not morning, but the realization that, quote, we're in need of an Eden, or at least a fun fete. In a very Germanic way, Wood insists on the way that articles can specify nouns. We need not Eden, but an Eden. We have not fad and pun, but a fad and a pun. This is the post-lapsarian condition from which we have to try to apprehend the way godlike forces, light, time, the archive, can appear in the poem as both quotidian and divine. One of the metaphors that Wood gives us is epigenetics, changes that arise from difference in expression rather than differences in underlying code. The poems become layers or laminations of light or time, resting over upon all of that which is ineffable yet undeniably concrete. Transformed, light becomes a fuel for vice. We see, quote, scrawled on scraps of cardboard, want a miracle, need a light. This language is perhaps that of, quote, an old dream. Perhaps it's the poets, perhaps the panhandlers, perhaps both. Even with all the particular insistence on articles, identity remains somewhat beyond the reach of experience. Instead, what we see is not the things themselves, but dim spires, quote, dim spires on the horizon, and, quote, suave silhouettes. The things become afterthoughts, and also the medium through which time passes. Notched Sunset starts on Bastille Day and ends on the day Carl Gustav Witt discovered the asteroid 433 Eros. In between, the sonnet sequence attempts to keep time, the same project that guided Wood's earlier book, otherwise known as Home, which also, quote, minds the way light gets limned. Written as a line a day, with a month between each line of each sonnet, and each line tweeted immediately after it was written, the poems in Notched Sunset start to model a method of metabolism. On teaching, Wood writes, quote, lectures on literature melt in the air, their apertures meld, my mutinies from stable years martyred. Tim Wood is the author of otherwise known as Home, published by BlazeVOX in 2010, and Notched Sunsets, which was published by Atelos in 2016. He's the co-editor of the Hip Hop Reader, published by Longman in 2008, and his critical work has been published in Jacket 2, Convolution, the Colorado Review, the Iowa Review, and the Boston Review. He earned his Ph.D. from UC Berkeley, go Bears, an M.F.A. from the Iowa Writers Workshop, and is currently an associate professor of English at SUNY Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. For spring 2024, he's the Holloway Lecturer in the Practice of Poetry here at UC Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming Tim Wood.
Thank you for that amazing, stunning introduction. It was proleptic. You set this up well, and Andy, I'm very grateful for that. Beautiful reading. Give another obviously, that reading touched me, and it connects very well with what I want to do tonight. First, technology. Let's see if I can. Okay. The thing I appreciated most about that introduction was the beautiful reading of Holderlin, which I can't do myself. So it's so good to hear, and I'm so grateful. And I really appreciate the attention you paid to my work. And Andy has set things up quite well, but before I want to get to the reading, it's a night of gratitude. I have to spend some time doing some thank yous myself. Kathy started it, but I'm going to repeat it. Camille and Pedro, you guys have been great, and thank you for everything you've done for this reading and for the Holloway series. Dana Swenson as well, for everything you've done for me, for the reading tonight, and for the whole series. And of course, Kathy, thank you for everything you've done. There's lots of people who have made me feel at home here as a visitor, which I've appreciated immensely. Elliot, thank you. Grace and Linda, Eric, Cecil, Scott, who let me into the copy room, was a total lifesaver. I will never forget that. Fiona, Solmas, Jeffrey, Jesse and John Shabtai, who's here somewhere. There you are, thank you. We have more to talk about with Echo Poetics. And Bob, thank you for being here. Brenda, thank you for being here. I want to thank Patrick Shea, who's not here tonight, but Pegasus Books is here tonight, and B is here tonight. Thank you so much for tracking down my books in the wake of small press distribution suddenly and sadly shuttering. That was like almost an impossible task. Before I knew Pegasus was going to work its magic and find my unfindable books, I decided to make a chapbook for the reading. Partly because I'm always telling my students to take back the means of production and just make something and distribute it and get it out there. So I've made a book, Impositions of the Sun, and it is also an elegy for Lynn. So it's back there, as well as the books that Pegasus miraculously, and I'm grateful, found. These are apparently rare objects. Finally, I want to thank my students. Students here are great. The students in my class have been really inspiring, provocative. I love that they push back, they ask questions, and bring all kinds of amazing imagination into the room, and it's been lots of fun. And I'm gonna miss our morning bibliomancy sessions, and I can't wait to see the books you're going to make. So as has been mentioned, but I'll mention it again, the Holloway Poet position is a huge personal honor because I was here, grad student, 20 years ago, co-curating this very series with Lynn Hajinian. The time of my return has been bittersweet, but I'm really grateful for being here right now to give this reading, and I want to dedicate it to Lynn, which we've already done. This homecoming has me thinking about duplication, repetition, revision, and return. And the poems I'll be reading tonight are centered around those ideas. Camille, in your introduction, I think you brought some of that out. It's kind of embedded in what I write, and I'm noticing that as I listen to you. So, while I'm reading, some of my visual poems will be up in a loop, I hope in a loop. So your eyes have something to do while your ears listen. Since I was 23, I've been writing a poem on my birthday. And this first poem is one of those poems. April 3rd. Today's the day when nothing happens. Your birth under the radar, no notice. Nothing written in the air. No bombs, catastrophic home. No latent inventory of patented inventions. Custody battles give way to other customs. All the buildings at a standstill, and people still stand in mobs looking down at their hands. But no arrests today. The Capitol's overrun and remains uncaptured. No crucifixions, and not a single confession. The crownings and treatises go the way of the parliamentary treatises and the treason. The libel trial brings to light a truth that kills, yet not a single murder. On the trail snaking through the patient, indifferent redwoods, where the sunlight filters through the crown cover for 1,000 years. No speeches today about the mountaintop, no Mount Everest of the mind to summit, no kidnappings or death marches, no signatures of authorization, nothing to deliver by Pony Express. No forfeitures or tornado outbreaks, no plane crashes in Croatia, a real abatement of massacres and mass suicides. The forest removals removed, the rescues recused, the reconnaissance no longer coerced as nuance wanes into a nuisance now with nothing to rediscover. Nothing to photograph. No violations of the antitrust laws, and the obscenity charges neatly dropped. No ecce homo, no habeas corpus, just a certain litany of births and deaths, high holidays, and oblique observances. External links to a calendar with leap years implied, like a dimly audible Gregorian chant. It singed singing, no longer a sign of wanting to begin the world. In 2019, I caught an interview between Ryan Adams and Taylor Swift. And Ryan Adams asked Taylor Swift about her writing process. And she said, if I get an idea that I feel like is a cool observation and it's a cool lyric thing, I just write it. I type it into an endless notepad on my phone. And I really love the idea of an endless notepad of cool lyric things. So I started putting lines into my phone. And then the pandemic happened, and I stopped doing it, and I lost track of this list. And then when I rediscovered it and came back to it, I realized I had an archive of my imagination before the pandemic. So I wanted to mine that and make that into poems. And so I started a series called Swift and Epilion, and I'll read 2 of these poems. Drawn inward. I had dreams of the world ending, and now the world is ending. Lots lost and slots time stole from the gambling machines. Restless is not the same as a relentless reaching for research on a searing sea, a horizon sun's aching ring arching over a ridged finger of ridges. An aside dies as an idea, since wrong is the most conservative word in the English language, with its scorched earth policy toward alternatives and possibility, even patterned over a patter of plosives resolving like ripples. Do you believe everything you say? The empty helmets lament. Its growling grows loud as the thundering Harleys backfiring down a small town street. The windows of the diner rattle like a predator's precatory preface to a world that's not preordained, except exceptions happen naturally in nature. And we append a rally of nomenclature. Everyone wants to dedicate to you, but not because they're fans of ants or other delicate insects. Uncertainties remain, though unremaining is certain. Drawn, I am all llama inward. The events of my misremembered past, like ghost DNA, I am the questing in the question. Where are you in the lies of these lines? You get what you take. Soup is cheaper than tear gas bombs. The ancient continuities, attenuated in epicormic growth, the sad ordinary story, a raw sorry war, an insolent viola's violet violence, ocula dentivis, the caged heartbeats, and is freed in the exhalation. The egret does not regret the pandemic Goldilocks with its involucre of hair tossed into the wind, tired of being tied down. The lips of the apocalypse, clip your turn cheek. A disgraced grace, a misspelled spell, a cellophane cello's phantasmic phonetics, its motley melody remotely phoned in, a mood doomed to mitigate wit. Am I mistaken to believe my mistakes take me beyond the podium pandemonium? No doubt about it, you are scared that caring will scar you. Reading Seneca on the Venice boardwalk. Learn the cliches and go toward the light of a previously purchased condition that approximates like a hominin. Interject here the rejected subject of abject objects subjected to their subjects. Can there ever be a very last time for anything? If we go on poised against our fears, refutation of the impromptu prompts, the imagination imposed on our posed lives, propped up as promotional ads for a life we're almost living? How possibilities ossify if I follow the simile toward the simulacrum, the switchbacks of like after like, ravening for approval like a pack of painted dogs. What do I have to prove when we do not in fact exist in fact, but rove, reeling from the real, unraveling or reveling in the sound-bitten domain of bound wisdom? The bus stop teaches us patience. The one-hit wonder teaches persistence. That single intrepid song, the disappointment felt in our achievements. The way of suspiration inspires suspicion that indecision is a form of ineluctable delay, or that decision forges endings just because life is too swift with its aleatory what-ifs, transpiring without an expiration date, and power is just a lucky number. Or a bear that tears up the car for a stick of cherry lip gloss glamping in the glove compartment. No love lost, comparing any emporium's aporia to a mise en place of wonder. But what the fuck does it mean when even today the bright sun beams over Bukowski's original nightmare on the Venice boardwalk as I tour my children through the gentrification of my childhood haunts, squinting to find the repetitions in a ruin? I tell them making anything is fraught with knowing. It will come into the world, just like any other June day. Okay, now for some sonnets. What we've all been waiting for. This is what was promised. So the way these sonnets transpired, I got to grad school, I got to Berkeley, and was worried that I'd stop writing poetry. I mean, that grad school thing was daunting. So I came up with this scheme to write 31 sonnets simultaneously, one line a day, writing all the first lines the first month, and then the second lines the second month. So there was a gap of a month between each line. I'll read one of these from notes, number 14. This is in the first book. Always then beginning with some luck. February stars, the verb is see. Tub to not let fog odor go live. Cluck. Ezra for a girl and for a boy, frivolity. Riffle as I croon the reef moonlit belly. Eponymous to niches, founders, skynes, and rhymes. Zoetrope the way it minces down the hall toward the real. Rights out of edicts buy into the heathen grind. Above the high-rise lies a low ledge where I'd rive, pitched consonant S, tars in the mired hutch, stars. Oh, the sleuth of the city stalls to gather and revive. Up from the floor the rude can blurt, nor less synthesis, cogs stick like dates. Days send out the mouth's moody boom and debate. So I kept thinking about this way of writing sonnets. I felt there was more work to do. There was something here to write about, to play with, and so revisited it in my second book, Not Sonnets. And despite the years passing, around maybe almost a decade between the two books, you might hear resonances since this was a revisiting of these poems. These though were written in Germany, which is why they might have had that German vibe, like Camille was picking up on. 14. Oh, good hope, men of Hartford, all led yards under the stars amid one time a winsome, lissom, microscopic luck. And August is full of hijinks and ignominy. Until the tale notes well the would-be rills and the moonstruck languages or earths or eons. The nitty-gritty of Nuyorican cafe tunes turns on the breeze. My nights swell. An anointing turns tunes into touch as undertones are nabbed in dew. Orphic undertows rinse a fitful eye in glowing vowels, bolted to a derelict redaction of nouns in a nude Dion din. Randy red rhymes rot ruddy confetti as the future's anthem makes inroads and furcates the ruts with ambiguity. Bad art is a watermelon, seriously. A confidant's fidelity beams confidence, misreading the future's defunct chart. Oracles smear O's into these prolonged tirades. The end is ruthless, equitable, moody, and as itinerant as an Iditarod. The final sonnet is another return to this form that I've been working on since coming back to Berkeley. So this one is pretty new. And the lines seem to have gotten longer with time. The gnomon's ashen shadow ripens like ethylene, a sassier fear taught a gnarly gnosis. Gonna run ahead now and leave the evicted avatar in the rear view, secreting syllables in the loamy air like crates of unplayable albums, mumbling, fade short for fatal. So Argonauts of the world, unite, go nuts with your yelps and amens as we sail aloft this throb and strum of afterthought. To desist from the nereid's internal ecstasies and exhort instead an anesthetized nomos, a cortege of reused sloops, untied, drawn out on the tide, and away from any existing exit over death's anaerobic slop, racing to no end. Dead even dead, so it's always a tie. In lieu of wild carrot, the hemostatic yarrow, its red litmus staunches a year like a nesting of tarot fools. The yowl is not an early language, the eolith not an early tool, an ohm not a deposed ohm. But a buoy joy is alighting that we must let fly or else it unspools. So enamored with detours, its roving erodes the enamel off the equipment for living and saws ennui into the dole and drum of time. A tuba call of California's eared seals exhort a call of sea fire from under the funnel cloud in an annoya of sea mist. The light to light up a tumescent, gondoling, sailing scented sea with its entombed runic ruins of coral reefs, pallid and maligned, and we in awe that the glint of elegy gang off de glay, as if a trite tada could cheat hate out of whatever we weigh in, while senile naiads unbear their fornix tattoos and unbar the fornical sea to amuse the new muse, Euea, whiling away in their midst. While Giotto's choral chordal chants accompany tandem motets of dust motes that divot a devout light so. And so we say a sound can save us, at least near so, and so far. From this awkward, esoteric telic doom that hefts and hawks a heap of errata to burst unevenly like terracotta upon this terradome while we let to bed thaw. All the while eyeing Odin in his tarsier with tasered t-shirt, Sleipnir like a three-hearted octopus, giddy-aps toward Ganoon-Gagap. Then wavers, touting the Vonner's final waiver forever and ever. Start again? Okay. This is the last poem, which is also a recent one. It was instigated by a poetry prompt that I got from Presley, one of my students in the verse class. And it took shape after the beautiful memorial reading of Lynn's Happily that Elliot set up. The title of this poem is the last line of that book. What will come next? We go when it departs. There's also an epigraph, which is a spam text I got while revising the poem. Is your WhatsApp the same number? I would like to add you as a friend, and I will contact you when I go to Orange County. Here we are again, and for the first time. Under the auspices of friendship, we exclaim, it's been so long, like what, 30 years? Not possible. And yet, yes, possibility is the only thing that makes time open up this way, so we meet again in a cafe in Lafayette. Have you ever been here before? Never. But I'm here with you now. What makes strangers into friends and good friends strangers and then back into friends? We surprise ourselves with what we can make each other recall. Because this is friendship, we attest to the fact that something happened and we were both there to witness it, whatever it was. We are strangers until we're introduced and form a band, or promise a mutual friend to go together to her favorite bar because she's dying and cannot bring her there herself. Or meet in a class, or online, or on a ridge or a bridge, and go out and then get married. Friendship arranges our days into a scintillating array of desiderata. Friendship immutably misreads also ran as also rain, and thereby haplessness pleasantly transmutes into atmospheric renewal by the addition of another's eye. In the end, friendship is not an ends and doesn't end when we say, so long, no matter how long the departure. Since we also say, it's been so long when we meet again. Repair is part of the aperture of friendship through which we see this far off ship adrift in a windless afternoon that feels boundless. Destined but not hurried, and with no particular destination other than the direction it ends up happily taking. Talking to everyone, a man bellows, hey, do any of you smart college kids know where Davis Hall is? He's hobbling along the shaded paths of the university as the throng whizzes by until one kid headed the other way steps up to him and says, I've never heard of Davis Hall, but I can find out for you, and takes his phone and holds it out for the man to see, saying, geez, it's all the way across campus and turning around, but I'm going that way and I can take you there. Thank you. Questions?
You were talking about the idea of replication and duplication, and also the idea of return. And your poems are populated with all these replicated or duplicated sounds and different phonemes or units of meanings. And you mentioned in passing you were talking with Professor Choctaw about eco-poetics, and just by a repetition of sounds, that also leads me to thinking about eco-poetics and the idea of echo, which is sort of a flippant divergence, but I wonder what is your take about this perennial theme in nature or in ecology of duplication, replication, or pairing, because we know that a lot of life processes and the writing of pictures come from the duplication or the replication of the DNA molecule, which is a kind of writing, and which in form resembles what they're doing up there. So these are a lot of my rambling thoughts, but I wonder what would be your response to these.
Lucy, I think you're exactly right. What you made me think of in the reading I gave tonight and where my head's going, my work is moving toward an eco-poetic, or trying to figure out ways to think about how writing can engage in a post-Anthropocene space. I mean, the problem with poetry is it's language, and so it's human-centered by definition. So how do you decenter a reader or decenter the writing, or how do we reposition ourselves so that the human isn't the center of it, is one of the questions I'm trying to think about formally. As far as the way you were phrasing the question, one thing you make me think about is that I hadn't been thinking about with the repetition of my poems, is a lot of them have echoes. Like the sonnets start with rhyming Shakespearean sonnets. They kind of have Shakespeare in the background. So there's a way that the constant sonic evolving and reimagining is a duplication, and is something that has a resonance with a kind of a natural evolution, which I think is kind of interesting. I haven't thought about it. I have to think about it more. The other thing is, when I said that last sonnet that I wrote was long, like that the lines were getting long, that's intentional, and what I'm moving toward is this idea, and I think this was at the heart of your question, where the sonnet is being just overrun by longer lines, like the fecundity of language, the fecundity of nature, and a kind of resistance to the poetic formal structures, which metaphorically to some resistance to human social structures and the way we want to kind of contain, right? So those are some things I'm starting to think about, and that's what your question gets me musing about. Anything else? Everyone's staring at me. Yeah, Kathy.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your relationship between poetry and time. So like with the sonnets, you have this kind of dilated durational constraint where you write one poem one line, right, every month, and then I was also thinking about your pandemic poem, and I think the pandemic really sort of upturned our idea of time, and I was curious about how your process of writing was also determined by time in a different way.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's at the heart of all this stuff, right? Is the formal. I'm interested in bringing together intention and coincidence and accident into some space for something to happen, or for something to be made, something beyond what I might expect, and therefore I hope what a reader might expect. And so it's ways of reorienting ourselves, reorienting our imaginations, or thinking of other ways and other possibilities that language can offer us to think about ourselves in the world. In terms of time, that just seems kind of how we imagine time seems fundamental. Wittgenstein, I think I get this right, says time is a muddle felt as a problem. And I guess I feel it as a muddle and a problem. And that how we think about time and how we articulate time, or use time to articulate, is going to change what we see. In an ecocritical, just because it's been evoked, for example, think about ecocritical concerns. One problem we have is just having human duration being the baseline for how we think about things. And we might need, how do you think about millennia? And how do you think about deep time? And all this stuff is a challenge. So, and this gets to maybe my visual poems, part of what I'm interested there is immediacy. Like, can a poem just have, like, you get it and it's 2 seconds? It can take a long time to write, so then there's those durations with like what the creative time frame versus the reader time frame. What do these different time frames of reading, writing, imagining, building within the constraints, temporal constraints, what do they do to the work and what do they do to our ways of imagining ourselves in the world, I think is what I'm after. John,
yeah. Well, I just adored your last poem, really, really so much. I
Thank
think
you.
Women would love that poem about friendship, and it certainly is one way you're registering time, felt time. It was so long. So I wondered, did you go back and look at like Cicero?
I absolutely went back and looked at Cicero. And now I need to go back and look at Cicero. Why Cicero? What were you thinking about Cicero?
Let me not go down that.
Okay.
Let me not take that road.
Okay.
But yeah, I wondered if you even outside the poem, might say more about time and friendship. And to me, it's one way that we mark time, and it's a way that we mark time in common with other species.
Yeah. It's a nice observation. I appreciate too, because that poem's new and it definitely has temporality, and it does come into conversation with women, which I hadn't really thought about, but that's, I've done my Whitman meeting, so he's in here rattling around.
Yeah.
He stopped somewhere waiting for me, and I guess he came in and took hold of the poem. That poem is a very just personal sense of time coming back here. I haven't had this kind of duration in my personal experience, right, coming back after 20 years. And there's people here who I haven't seen, and I meet them. We haven't seen each other in so long. There we go. That trying to just make sense of that experience brings into the poem and into relief these various kinds of temporality. So that's very, very personal, but yes, it feeds into the other questions I keep pursuing. Which you can't, as much as you try to escape, you just keep coming back to, this poem's different. It's about something else. But it just keeps being about these obsessions. Okay, with time in mind, another question.
I have a question.
Okay, give it to me.
So, since you're doing all this like revision, rereading, and reflecting, how do you think about yourself as the writer you were in all of these different periods of time?
How do I think about myself as the writer I was?
Yeah,
it's kind of, that's interesting. I experienced that. I don't know how to talk about that. I think that's.
It was supposed to be a softball.
Yeah, it is. This is my sister. Yeah, always asking the hard questions. Yeah, coming. I think that what's interesting to me, I guess why I was having trouble for a second trying to answer that is I immediately thought about my past selves. And I think when I'm writing, I am doing the opposite, is I'm interested in what happens with these recontextualizations. We're constantly recontextualizing, and sometimes I'm just doing that on a very line-to-line basis. I mean, that's what these sonnets were for me, is in that first book, the Not Sunsets, I didn't look back at the lines. So I thought I was creating these kind of non sequiturs, I was talking to Dana about it. Dana observed that, oh no, you were doing like voltas on every line. And I thought I was escaping the volta. Actually, I was just making voltas everywhere on these hard turns, right? And when I wrote Not Sunsets, one reason I wanted to go back is that I felt a little bit robbed in that experience. I really liked doing it, but having the final series, I wanted to go back and write poems. I think of it as like Jackson Pollock, doing painting without touching the brush to the canvas, and how much restraint that takes. If you're a painter, all you want to do is paint, and you spend your time painting by not painting. And so I kind of wrote those poems and realized I kind of wrote poems by not writing poems. I was writing these lines that were becoming poems. So then the Not Sunsets, I would look back at the line a month later and then write something else. And so every line was recontextualizing the line before. I was responding to it, but I had no idea what the original intention had been. So that's my practice. And maybe as far as thinking about constantly going back to my own work, it's a way of thinking about what is a way of being in the world, right? Allowing these kinds of things that have happened and these things that like accrue in one's experience to keep becoming something else. Thank you very much.